All right, here we are. Dennis and I are talking on Zoom, and we are live on YouTube right now. And so hopefully, we'll have a few people join us. And if you do, you can chat in YouTube, ask us questions, make comments. And so as we go along, I try to catch them. Sometimes I don't interrupt the conversation, but if I don't acknowledge anything while we're talking, then we definitely will at the end run through the comments and any questions that are there. So um, today I am talking to Dennis Apple, who has become a friend in this grief world. And Dennis was actually on about 3 years ago now. We had what was called a virtual summit, and it was kind of an online conference, and Dennis joined me for that. And let me just give a little background on Dennis, and then we're going to jump into our topic, which is a really tough one, struggling to trust God. So, Dennis, he served as a pastor for over 30 years. And after the death of his son, Dennis, he started specializing in support groups and grief counseling. And Dennis continues to be a speaker to grief groups, specifically about how he struggled for years with the death of his son while still serving as a pastor. And he writes articles, blogs. He's the author of two books. I've read both of them and they're good. One of them is called Life After the Death of My Son, and the other one is a novel, and it's called Runaway Griever. And Dennis, you were retired, but you came out of retirement, didn't you? You're overseeing a bunch of pastors now.
Yeah, I did. I flunked retirement, didn't do that very well. So I'm,
Flunked retirement.
yeah, too much. I think with my wife's blessing, by the way, I think she was glad for me to get back at it again. So I'm back at it again, full time, and I work I'm a congregational care pastor with a wonderful group of people. I serve here in Leawood, Kansas, south suburb of Kansas City, at the Church of the Resurrection. So
Mm,
yeah, that's where I'm at.
I'll bet that's been an interesting challenge during all this COVID, Corona, shelter at home stuff, huh?
Yeah, yeah, you got it. And it is it's an interesting church, and we have found that it's harder to go back than it was to leave. When we were told that the restrictions were coming, and that the virus was here in Kansas City, and we needed to get out. And so it was much easier to turn out the lights and close the door than it was now to go back. So
Mm.
we're struggling with how to go back and still be safe about it. So that's the big challenge these days. But
Yeah, I've thought about that too. How do churches do that when you're limited to how many can come in? And it's
mhm.
like, wow, that's got to be tough. So we
Oh
gotta
yeah, oh
pray for
yeah.
the churches and the leadership and the pastors and
Mhm.
how to have a transition that helps everyone.
We've got about 20 funerals backed up that we
Mm.
cannot have yet, and because of just the limitations on the size of people. I did a funeral here just as we were coming into this whole thing a few weeks ago in a chapel with 150 empty seats, just looking at a
Mm.
camera, live streaming. So there's all kinds of things that we have to
Wow.
do now to try to make it work. So it's a different world, it really is.
It is, boy. And yeah, that whole funeral stuff and deaths during
Hmm.
all of that, that's all of this is tough. It's
Oh
just
yeah, yeah.
tough. And some of this really when you add like grieving the death of a child or a bereaved parent on top of that, it can make things even harder as far as what's God doing, why isn't he stepping in, what's the
Hmm.
problem here with God,
Hmm.
that kind of a thing. So before we kind of jump into that topic itself, Dennis, would you tell us about your son Denny and when and how you lost him from this earth?
Well, sure. Yeah, I'll be glad to. My wife and I moved out here, just a little background. I'm from Indiana and moved out here in 1982. The boys were young, and I had taken a position with the church, had their global headquarters right here. So I was working in specialized ministries, and we loved Olathe. Olathe is just a south suburb to Kansas City, and just a nice place to raise your family. We thought we'd hit the jackpot. Really, really happy with the town, in my work, and then I did that for 5 years, and the children were growing, and loved it here. And we then I joined a large church, a college church. It was a church, oh, I think what, 2,000, 2,500, pretty good size. That's about 10 of us pastors on the staff, and so we I specialized in single and senior adult ministry, and so it was one of the things I would do with the single adults would take them on a ski retreat to Colorado, and it was February of 91, 29, just over 29 years ago. Of course, we always took our my family, my boys loved to ski, and so we were going to go to Summit County, ski on Copper Mountain, and I've done it many times. And it was the Sunday before we would leave on a Wednesday, and Denny, now here he is 18 years old, and was having a trouble with his throat. And I remember Sunday, he said, "Dad, I got a sore throat." And I looked at it and I thought, "Oh man, yeah, we got to get into the doctor right away. You got to get you fixed before we can go on the ski trip." And so went to the doctor, and he said, "Well, he's got mononucleosis, and here's the medication, and there's something for his pain, and some antibiotic to help him." And so he said, he can go on a ski trip, but he won't feel like skiing. So
Mm.
that was on a Sunday, and Denny laid around Monday, Tuesday night. He said, can I sleep on the couch in the family room, and down by the fireplace, remote, just a nice place to be. And sure, that's fine. So it was fine. And so the next morning, we weren't going to leave till the evening of that Wednesday. And I remember I took the younger boy, Andrew, took him to school. It was real foggy, real dense fog that morning. And I can remember like it happened just this morning, really. But anyway,
Mm.
took him there, came back, had a little bowl of cereal, and I was looking down from the kitchen down toward the family room, the fireplace and all. And so I thought, I saw the covers off of his legs a little bit, and I thought, I'll go down, straighten that up. And so when I got down and I saw him, he's laying on his stomach with his head turned over toward the left. And I looked and I thought, my goodness, he's really, really quiet. And the night before I could hear him breathing a little bit because of his swollen adenoids and all. But I got there, and it's just that sense that he knew something was not right. And I tried to shake him. I got up close to him, and I thought, oh gosh, something's not right. And so I tried to stir him, nothing, and I immediately knew that there was trouble here. And I flipped his body off onto the floor and started CPR, and yelled for my wife to call 911 all at the same time. And my brother, one of my younger brothers, was living with us. He's a EMT, and he heard me scream. And boy, moments like it's an oh my God moment, and I just, man, he heard me scream. He came down and looked at him, checked him, and a couple of things. And he said, "Oh, Dennis, he's gone. He's dead." And while on my knees, one of the first things I said, Laura, was I said, "Oh God, this is not supposed to happen to me." And I think that probably reveals the feeling I had that just because I was a pastor, because I was, in the church trying to serve God, that this happens other places. It doesn't happen here. And so it was, of course, ridiculous thought, but that came out of my mind, out of my mouth. And so you just, how it is. Every parent knows this. When you know your child is gone, you go into shock.
Mm-hmm.
And the shock, I've often likened it unto when a dentist anesthetizes a tooth. They can drill it all they want to. You don't feel it, you just go into a surreal kind of a dreamy thing. You think, oh gosh, this is not real, is it? This can't be happening. And so, I've often said to people, I think shock is a gracious thing that God does for us that keeps us from feeling the blunt of what has happened. We'll feel it later on,
Mm-hmm.
the numbing agent on the tooth, as it wears off, so shock does wear off a few weeks later. But man, that started me on my journey. And I was just knocked out of my mind it just couldn't happen. He was he's a triathlete, strong kid, loved to ski, and now this. And so we allowed for an autopsy. Of course, they wanted to find out if there was something that would have ramifications for the younger son. And the death certificate just simply says, after the autopsy and everything they did, complications due to mono. That's all it says.
Mm.
So there you go. And I
That didn't feel like much of an answer, did it?
no, really not. No, it really didn't. We theorized that there was a reaction. One of the medications they had him on, the pain reliever, had a narcotic in it. It was, I'll tell you what it was. It was extra strength Tylenol with codeine, and we suspect that's what it was that he had a reaction to. And just, the bottom line is your child's dead. And so we were launched into our worst nightmare. I will go on and say that, of course, the church, my colleagues and pastors of the church, they came rushing in. I mean, they came running in there and were just all over it. And women and people, of course, we're in shock now. My wife and I can't remember a lot of things, but they
Mhm.
were right there to support us. And I'll just go on and tell you this: the next morning, of course, you don't sleep. You're just you think you're in another world, and you are really. You're just out of your
Mm, that's
mind.
true, yeah.
And so the next morning, I was in the bedroom. I was walking, and I'm hoping and praying. I'm in a nightmare. This is not going to happen.
Mhm.
And I was walking back and forth, and my wife was downstairs. The women from the church were helping her with answering the phone, the door. People were bringing things in, and there was a notebook, I think I got from Walmart. It's kind of just a simple notebook by the bed, and I grabbed that notebook and I scribbled out a kind of a desperate prayer. It was like, "Oh God, help me. We're not going to make it." I mean, I remember years ago, prior to that, back in Indiana, I had been a chaplain to a grief group. Most of them were people who had lost their companion, and many of them talked about journaling. And so that's what I did. I just scribbled that note. Well, the very next night it was still there, and I did it again. And the very next night, again. Long story short, I did it almost 5 years,
Wow.
and then I had a stack of journals, pretty high, and still got them, of course. And I then they sat in the back bedroom or back in the guest room closet for about 10 more years. It was about 16 years after that after Danny died that my friend Harold told me. He said, I think you've got something to say to grieving parents, bereaved parents. He said, why don't you think about writing? And I said, oh boy, nobody wants to hear this, because I was mad at the church, mad at God. I mean, it was all there in the journals. And no, he said, why don't you do? He said, and why don't you start by listing out the 10 most important things you've learned across these 16 years? So that was the beginning outline that I used. And I thought, nobody wants to hear this, but turns out a publisher did want to. And so they wanted me to use journal entries. I've got a copy of it here, and you can probably see it. That's the book.
Mhm.
and so it's got a lot of journal entries in it. Every chapter's got,
Raw and real stuff.
well, I remember when I was writing, I thought, they're not going to believe this, that a minister would feel this way, but I just, after the initial shock wore off, as I said, like the numbing agent in your tooth, you know, I just became so angry. And here I am, a pastor in a church trying to serve other people. And I am just as angry as I can be. I remember I wanted to pull, I thought, why? Why, God? Why does this happen to me? And I just wanted to take my desk in the office and just throw it through the plate glass window. I had that much adrenaline surging through me, and I didn't know what to do with it. I was just, and in the beginning, I got to say this, in the beginning, I could pray and go a little bit, but my mind, one thing I've learned about shock is that the grief takes up so much place in your mind and your thinking, you can't concentrate very well. I couldn't read very well. I'd have to go back and read it again. Normally I could look at a phone number and dial it. I had to look at it 2 or 3 times, and I thought, my gosh, I'm losing it here,
Mhm.
And so grief can take up so much space in your mind that you feel like you're losing it, or coming down with some form of dementia or Alzheimer's. I
Yes,
couldn't remember
exactly.
people's names. I'd lose stuff. I would forget to turn off on the street. And so it's fortunately it's temporary, but boy, it stayed with me longer than I would think. And so that gives you a brief outline of where I started from, and yet I felt like I couldn't tell anybody just how mad I was at God and even the church. And that's a whole other thing there. People come up and begin to quote Bible verses to me, and I believe in the Bible and all that. But I tell you, when people gave me scripture telling me how thankful that I'd be all thankful in all things, as St. Paul says, I just wanted to blow up. And I fit to be tied, man. But I kept a lot of it inside. I didn't talk about it for a long while.
Mhm. Yeah, those scriptures just, for a lot of us, they just don't help. We know what the word says,
Yeah,
but we can't see the reality of that in what has happened to us.
yeah, yeah. And people got their favorites. I remember this is interesting because it was just a few weeks before all this happened that I've just told you. I was invited to speak to a Bible study, and I think maybe a women's group, big women's group there at the church. And I spoke on that very topic of Romans 8:28. And we know that God takes all things, work
Mhm.
them together. You know the verse. And of course, I did the corollary to that is in the life of Joseph in the Old Testament, when he had all this stuff happen. And then he finally revealed his identity to his brothers. And he said to them, "You, my brothers, meant this for evil, but God meant it for good." So, I thought I walked out of that Bible study, boy, I did a pretty good job there. Well, I had no
Got your
idea.
on the back there.
No, had no idea it was going to be my turn to test that out. And man, it took me to hell. And I thought, oh my goodness, I had no idea how long it would take to try to reconcile myself. And I don't use the word closure, and a lot of
Mhm.
people talk about that. I don't use that at all.
No,
But I use the word reconcile, and of course
like
that's a banking term. The bank says you got
yeah.
this much, the statement here, but your checkbook may be clear out here someplace else because of bad math, and you have to reconcile and bring it into alignment with what's what there. And that takes a long time to reconcile yourself to what's happened and try to take it and put it in its proper place in your life. Because I mean, it took me to a place where I thought I would never return. I'd never be happy again, really.
Mhm.
So yeah, I could rattle on all night about
No,
this.
I no, that's that's what I want, Dennis.
Well,
Because this
it,
whole thing about struggling with trusting God
yeah.
is so real. And even if, I guess, like for me, I was one of those, I didn't get angry with God, but it's still hard to pray, and it's still
Mhm,
hard to feel like, what's the point of praying if you're just going to do what you want to do?
mhm.
And like you said, I love that, the whole reconcile thing, because we try to make sense of it in our heads.
All right.
We try to force God to make sense and to explain yourself to me, God, you got some explaining to do
Mhm,
here.
mhm.
And none of it makes sense, none of it. And yet to just say, well, you just got to trust him, the whole blind faith thing doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah, it's just a very, very yeah, what just reoriented my whole thinking of God and prayer. I think as Christians, and many times it's taught in churches that if you do A, B, and C, you can get, this formula, everything's going to be fine. I confessed one time, I said, my prayer life used to be like that, like going to a vending machine. You
Yep.
get it, you see what you want, and you put your money in, hit the right button, and you're going to get the right result, the product down below. That's not,
And we don't get it, we just shake the machine and kick it. That's not the
no,
button I pushed.
no, that's right. And it's in the Bible, of course. Jesus, you think about him in the Garden of Gethsemane. He prayed 3 times, for that cup of suffering to be removed. It wasn't. Maybe St. Paul was following the same pattern when he prayed 3 times for that thorn in the flesh to be removed. It wasn't.
Mhm.
And and so I do believe that God can take even the worst hellish thing that's ever happened and can and can wring something good out of it. But it took me a long time because I think I had these certain assumptions.
Hmm.
I think I assumed that God was going to do this, this, and this, and it's not that way. Uh, Even Jesus talked about the Holy Spirit. He said, "You don't know where it's coming from, but you don't know where it's going." But the mysteriousness of God. The first book in the Bible, of course, is the book of Job, and of course, it's all a book about a book of suffering, and and it all turns out in the end okay. But I hung on to the words of Job too, and he said, "Even though he slays me, still will I trust in him." Well, it took me a long time because
Yeah.
there were times when I thought, like you, and I thought, what good does it do to pray? If God's going to do what God wants to do, why should I even pray? I wrote it in the books. I remember I would go to the hospitals and make visits to people who were sick and getting ready for surgery and one thing, and I would pray for them, and I'd go out in the hallway after I finished my pastoral visit and prayer. And I remember thinking this, I thought, I might as well be praying to the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy. God does it. You know, I didn't care. And I was like that for a long time. And it just took me so long. And all the while there was a spiritual thing going on inside of me because you're trying to figure this out. Here
Hmm.
I am as a pastor. I'm
Yeah.
still going through the motions. I'm singing the songs and teaching it, doing small groups and classes, and that's a whole nother thing. But I'm going through the motions, and I am getting some help from the support groups in the church and all that. But all the time, there's this mysterious questioning going on. Does God really care? What's God going to do with this? What? And of course, and inside, grief just renders your heart, a grieving parent's heart, dead. You just feel dead. I mean, I'm just
Hmm.
walking
Yeah.
around like a zombie.
Hmm.
And so I thought, how long will this last? And then the other thing, of course, my wife. Yeah. I tried to go on and pretend like everything was okay. Beulah saw him crying, every time I come home at night, oh no, God, she can't move. She's paralyzed on the couch. And have to go out to eat again. And I remember going out to a restaurant, going out to Applebee's, and waitress come up and see the tears coming off of my wife's face and then giving me a dirty look like I'd caused the whole thing. He said, "What did you say to her?" So yeah, it was just awful. And I think, man, how long is this going to go? Will we ever be happy again? So I'm happy in our marriage. She was unhappy with me, and of course, some of her journal work is in that book too. And it's not pretty. I mean, she gets after me, and I'm mad at her. And you think, oh boy, is this marriage going to make it? And when you ask, we will soon. My wife will soon be married in less than a month. I better get a card. June 6th. Uh, we'll be married 56 years.
Oh
And
my,
yeah,
wow.
if you ask Beulah, she would tell you most of them were pretty good. Yeah. but boy, I'm telling you, when you're trying to make it after the loss of a child, I mean, like it drives a wedge between you. And I remember Alan Wolfelt, he said it so well. He said, in the North American culture, he said, what you normally see in losses, and especially with the loss of a child, he said, women will mourn the loss while men try to replace
Mm,
and go on, men go to other things. And
mhm,
I remember telling my wife that now I get it, why people would turn to drugs, alcohol, sex, food, gambling, throw yourself into some other interest, work even. And that's
mhm.
what I did. I just immersed myself I just keep busy all the time. I wouldn't have to think about this.
But that's
I,
interesting because your work was being a pastor.
yeah, yeah. But it was a busyness kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I,
You
I'm
could still
still,
help others even if you
yeah,
felt like,
yeah. I was questioning the whole time, and I was pretty good. I have a good empathetic side to me. I had people come to me and he said, "Man, my wife told me to come to see you because you know about pain." And I thought, "Boy, I sure do. I know about pain. This is the worst." So it was just a horrible time to try to keep busy and again try to not think. I thought when I get up in the morning, here's what I do. I even the clock radio by the bed, keep that going, get in the car, turn the radio on, get to the office, just
mm, you don't have
emails
to
and
think.
phone and keep going. Don't stop. I felt
Mhm.
like I was trying to outrun it, because if I ever stopped, it would just come caving in on me.
Yeah.
And quietness was a killer because it would just invade my thoughts, and I thought, oh God, I'll never make it through this. And so it was just the most horrendous thing that I think is the worst thing that a man or a woman can experience is the loss of your child. I mean, there's just nothing in this world like it. I performed the funerals for my mom and dad. I officiated at those. And I'm the oldest of 10 children, my brothers and sisters and grandchildren, and they were hard. It was hard on them. I I didn't shed a tear.
Mm.
I told my wife, I said, "This is nothing, man. This is nothing compared to the loss of a child." And not to denigrate or make
Right, right.
light of that, but boy, I love my mom and dad, but man, this is in a whole other universe here. When you lose a child, it is absolutely the worst, and so it takes quite a toll on you. And I my heart, I didn't pass a physical, and over on the treadmill, didn't pass that. And so
Mm.
I'm downtown Kansas City, echocardiogram. And I remember the doctor coming in, and he looked at me and he said, I know what's going on here with you. And he said, I want you to try to lose a couple of pounds. And he said, you're going to have to deal with what's going on inside of you. And when I began to realize I'm going to have to talk about this, I'm going to have to put on the outside. And of course, that meant being vulnerable and really telling the truth, what I thought about God and the church, and these people coming around and tell me I should be thankful in all things. And so I started to open up. And when I did, it began to make a big difference in my own demeanor and my own walk. But spiritually, getting back to that, the topic at hand, it was hard to describe how my journey went. Because my Bible gathered dust, and I
Mhm.
didn't pray uh, privately. I couldn't. I was messed. I would do it at the chicken dinners and do it for people in a
Right, right.
pastoral way, but privately,
Mhm.
no. It took me well over 10 years before
Oh.
before I could really get to a place where I felt like I had a warm, growing, and a vibrant relationship with God. It's not
Mhm.
that way with everybody, I understand, but I meet more people that have that's that for them than it is the other way. And so, all of us do it differently, but
Mhm.
that's my story. It took me
Well,
such a
and
long
it's I
time.
think people need to know that, because if they're 8 years into this and they're still struggling with this relationship with God and the whole, like you said, the whole
Mhm.
church thing, the whole God thing, it's okay if that's where you
Oh,
are.
yeah.
It's okay.
Larry, that's one of the things I tell people. I say, be patient with yourself because God is
Mhm.
very bad. I came to realize that because it struck me one day. I thought, what if I'd have a heart attack when I was in that period of my life? What if I had a car crash, and of course, that could happen any time, an accident and die. What what would happen to my eternal soul? And I remember there was a time in my life, in my own pastoral life, when I had a pretty straight answer for that. You're either in or out, black or white, up or down. And don't be a hypocrite and all this. But man, when you have this sort of thing happen to you, I tell people be patient because I
Mhm.
really believe, and this really is humbling for me. I really believe that Almighty God knew just how messed up I was, and God would welcome me home because this
Yes.
this is a traumatic thing. When this happens, it staggers the soul of any man or woman who has a child, and you go through this. It is a god awful worst thing, and God knows just how messed up you
Mhm.
are.
Yeah.
One of my favorite verses I sign a lot when I'm doing book signings. I always try to remember to put what is it? Psalm 34:18. It said, "And God is near." One translation, "And God is nearest the brokenhearted and
Mhm.
those who are crushed in spirit." And I rest on that. I mean,
Mm.
God is indeed nearest, but sometimes
We
it feels
don't
like,
feel that nearness though, do we?
oh, no, 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 you don't. That numbness, I mean, you can't for a while. It takes a while. And there was a time, as I said, I tried to write it in a book and tried to describe it. And I remember it felt like when I was tempted to leave church, my faith and everything, it was like I said, I likened it unto a small child, unhappy, mad at his mother. And my cousin was like at one time, he told my aunt, he said, I'm going to leave home. My aunt he had threatened it many times. And on this time, my aunt said, okay, so I'll pack your suitcase, got some clothes hurriedly together and put a coat and hat on, take off. And he got the end of the driveway. He realized he had nowhere to go. And I was that way. I mean, I told people, I said, I was going to leave. I was going to leave God, the church, the whole thing. And I got as far as the back door. And I said, I hung out. I said it, I wrote it this way in the book. I said, I hung out near the back door of my faith for quite a while, trying to decide what I'm going to do. I knew instinctively, I knew there was nothing out there. But I was going to come in and try to regain and try to develop and nurture that relationship with God. And boy, there's a lot I don't understand about that. Of course I don't. Who does, about the ways of God? But I've come to trust in God that I don't always understand, but I still pray, and I pray more now than ever before. And yet at the
More
bottom
real
of
prayers.
yeah. It's a different kind of prayer now. But yeah, I think in many ways, I think it's just, it's more mature now than it was. And it's a growing. And when I get up in the morning, that's the first thing that's on my mind, is to go to that place of my readings and my prayer. That's my pattern. And but it wasn't always that way. Oh my goodness. And so I tell people to be very, very, very patient with yourself, because certainly God is the God that I know. The Bible. God is patient with us. And I'm so glad for that. Glad for the grace, the goodness of God that stood by and was patient and patiently led me back. And there are a lot of things, a lot of stepping stones and signs that God gave and showed me along the way.
And a lot of those you don't see until you look back.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's right. You
don't
don't
see them while you're there in the darkness.
Yeah.
Now, how many years ago was this? How long has Denny been
Well,
gone?
29 years ago. Next February the 6th will be 20 or be 30 years. Hard to
Wow.
believe. Yeah.
Now, I remember you talking about you and Beulah actually contemplated, if I remember correctly, you contemplated just checking out together.
Oh yeah. We did. Yeah.
Together.
Yep. We sure did, man. We did. And the thing is too, and a lot of people come up and tell you, and I still hear it once in a while. People say, "Oh, well, you better watch out, because people lose a child. There's a high rate of divorce." And when I was writing the book, there were I gave example to the opposite, to the contrary of that. The research that had been done that I used said that the people like us who had lost a child, their divorce rate was less than the common public when at that time. Now it could be different now, but I do see a lot of it. But at the time, people came up. Of course, that's great encouragement to you when you hear people talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go, oh my, that's all I need, after all this. But
Now, I'm just curious. I don't remember. Did Beulah struggle as much with her faith and her relationship with God as
Oh
you
yeah.
did?
Oh yeah, she did. I had to sit up at the front of the church. I'd usually be with the other pastors at the front of the church, she had a key to my office. She'd sit back in a kind of a dark place under the balcony, and 2,000, 2,500 people in there. But boy, I tell you, as soon as the last song and prayer, she made a beeline out of there, man. She was back up to my office, and I usually sit her up there by herself, sometimes crying, but all alone. She didn't want to be around people. It was a real fearful thing. And that's the way it is when especially in the first part of the grief journey, you're just scared to death. I didn't want to be around people, and it was just a real uneasy feeling to do that. So I was not too keen on that either, but boy, she did. Yeah, and she did. She had a struggle. And she, just like me, thought, oh my goodness, how could this happen to us? And it just shook the foundations of her faith as well. I've tried to get her to write, but she's still holding out. She's not ready to do it yet, but maybe one of these days. She did have a journal, and part of her journal entries are in that book. and she got it in there. I don't think Dennis likes me, and I was mad at her, and she was me, and so we thought, well, we're gonna put it in here. Here, it's the truth
Mhm.
about our journey. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's in there.
Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned that you realized that you needed to talk. You needed to
Mm.
start just kind of, so who was it that you finally opened up to?
Well, yeah, that's good. I had of course, Harold was a great close friend. Harold Ivan Smith is a great friend of mine, and has been for many, many years. He was like an uncle. He spoke. He did the eulogy at Denny's funeral and
Mm.
all of that. So I began to talk with him. He was the one that I could talk to. He, he was he I probably shouldn't say this, but he was a cussing friend. There were times I was just so mad. I I normally don't cuss, but I just there. Words are the vehicles that carry our feelings, and Harold was a cussing friend. I could say, Carol, I am just so damn mad about this. There were times when shoot just didn't get it. I just and along that line, I remember being in a support group, a compassionate friends support group here a while back, and we were talking along this line, and I was telling about a support group I was running a few years ago, and had a guy in there that he started talking about his son, and his boy was a good kid. But he just happened to be in the wrong place, the wrong time here in Kansas City, and it was a stray bullet that caught him, killed him, and so
Mm.
this dad was just so mad, and he got up and it was a period of time when regular language, English language, wasn't working so good,
Mm-hmm.
and so he started cussing, and so he just he was just so full of anger, and we're in a church, and here he is, he's cussing. He went out the room, and there was about 10 of us around the table, and he went down the hallway and down the stairs, and he was cussing, and everybody could hear it. Nobody batted an eye. I thought, yeah, it was a vicarious experience for us. He said it for all of us. And so the next day, the phone rings, and it's him, and Jimmy, and he said, Pastor, he said, I'm sorry about that cussing last night. And I said, well, you were just being honest about the way you feel. Yeah, he said, but I just wanted to apologize. He said, I'm sorry for cussing in front of your wife, Beulah. I went home, told her, she said, oh, he didn't know my uncles. So I heard it all. But there is a sense, and I think it was Philip Yancey, a writer, Christian writer, who said one time he said there's a certain part of the Psalms in the Bible that the scholars call the cussing Psalms, and he said it's probably, I think it's one of those in which Jesus, when he's crying out from the cross, he went to what was the 22nd Psalm, and he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? And they categorize them in that way. It's a certain section of the Psalms. But the words, as I said a while ago, are the vehicles that carry our feelings. And I was just reaching for words to express it. Like Harold was one of my buddies that I could do that with, and I could just let it rip with him and be really totally honest. So he was a godsend to me in those days. And then gradually, I began to be more forthcoming. And I tell it in the book on the 4 or 5 years later after Denny died. It was, well, 4 years. He was a freshman here at the university, and he would have graduated.
Mm.
And they wanted me to speak at the commencement, or it's the commencement, the service of that morning before the commencement. And so
All right.
I was one of the speakers, and I said, you want to know the truth? Here it is. I said, and I said, there's going to be a face missing in the commencement line when they get the diplomas, meaning my son. But I had that bedrock faith that somehow God was going to come through and help me get through that. But and when I began to start to get honest about that, that's when I think more of my healing began. And I learned that when you give your grief a voice, when you put on the outside what's on the inside, and that's what you do in groups, when you begin to trust people, that you can put it out there. And so one of my favorite favorite sayings along this line is an old Chinese proverb. It says, "Sorrow shared is sorrow halved." And the opposite, of course, is true. Joy shared is joy doubled.
Mm,
We've learned, it's one of the things we've learned during this pandemic, how much we need each other. And
hmm.
that's really important for people that are grieving. And people who have gone through what we have, you really need someone. And
Yeah.
so I encourage people, oh yeah, be with those that you can be, that you're safe with. Not everybody's safe, of course. It
Right.
kind of rubs you the wrong way when you're going to share your heart
Not
with
somebody who's
somebody.
going to try to fix you.
Yeah, yeah, they're going to fix you.
Mhm.
They're just waiting for you to take your best soul. He said, "Oh, I know what you need
Yeah.
to do. You need to read this book. You need to read this scripture.
Hmm.
You need to listen to me. I'll get you fixed, get you through this."
Hmm.
And they don't realize, that's not what we need. It wasn't the people that gave me all the advice and gave me all the scriptures. The people, Laura, that helped me the most, people came up to me with tears in their eyes. And they were just open hearted. And they said, I don't know what to say, with tears in their eyes. And then they just hugged me.
Right.
Those
Exactly.
tearful hugs are the ones I remember the most. And people
Yeah,
that
it's
listen,
funny you say that because one of the things I was just had written down here to touch on is the fact that we need our grief validated, and
oh, yeah.
we need people who can just be God's hug to us.
Oh, yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
feel huggable. And when we don't want one from
Oh,
him, that
mm,
people can just wrap their arms around us and
yeah.
love on us
Yeah.
in that deep, dark place.
Exactly. And people that will walk with you. And not everybody will do that. The pain of the loss of a child is so god awful. There's not many people around that are willing to do that.
Well,
But when you get,
especially people who haven't lost a child
well,
themselves.
that's what I meant.
That's
And
like really rare.
oh
Yes.
yeah, oh yeah, that's very unusual because it is so awful. You just want to hide your face from it, and they don't want to see it. They don't want to hear it. It's the
Hmm.
worst, and that's why people, other people who have lost children. That's why when we get together in support groups, why we're at home, man. I mean, we know these folks know, and we get each other. So
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
that's a great gift when you can be in the support group that where people also understand. And that's
Hmm.
that's and it is, that's what happens when you share your heart and somebody validates, somebody receives that. You walk out of those groups, those support groups or those conversations, you just feel like, somebody gets it,
Hmm.
and they understand, and it's a refreshing kind of experience. Be nice if one shot would do it and heal it, but it doesn't.
Right. Right.
It continues to build
The
up.
vaccine.
Yeah. And here we
We're
are,
still
Memorial
looking for
Day
the
week.
vaccine for that grief thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it, there's all kinds, of course, all kinds of grief triggers, things that will, sneak up on us. You just feel like you've been, ambushed by a memory or something you see that reminds you of your loved one, and here it comes again. It's like when I do workshops and things, sometimes I'll get Beulah's the valve off of her pressure cooker. I should have brought it in here, a little valve. And a lot of younger people don't know what that is, but the older ones do. Say, yeah, I know what that is. It's a valve on the pressure cooker, and that valve lets the steam out. If you didn't have that, you clamped it down, it wouldn't take long, that thing would blow up.
Hmm.
And people are like that too. You need safe people around you where you can
Hmm.
you can talk about what's going on the inside. Put on the outside what's on the inside. That's the work of mourning. That's what we do when we spend times in these conversations. Sometimes crying, sometimes laughing, but when we're with people that get it, we find that it's a great experience, and we walk away thinking, oh man, yeah, somebody knows what I'm going through. Very important.
Can you think of a time or something that happened that kind of opened your heart and opened the door for you to begin to pursue your relationship with God, feeling like maybe He is safe, maybe I can trust Him, even though, Denny's not here anymore and all this
Mhm.
happened?
Well, yeah, there were several times along the way when I began to take another look at my relationship with God. And I remember there was an Easter. I don't know how many years had been after he had died, And and as I said a while ago, I'm wandering around the church. I'm in shock and not, well, that initial shock, but that ongoing
Mhm.
thing that you just walk around like you're dead, like a zombie. That and just trudging along. And I there was a here at the university, the church is right next to the university, and there was a young man that I needed to talk to. I was helping. We had a big Easter pageant going on, and I was helping with the organization of the shuttles and the buses and vans, and we had several thousand people that came in for the big Easter pageant at the church. Well, I didn't want to be inside the church. I didn't want to. All the
Mm.
staff had to work, and I didn't want to be inside because that's all about loss of a
Right.
son, Easter egg. I didn't want to be in there.
Mhm.
So anyway, I am out in the. I need to talk to this young guy. He's helping me with a lot of stuff outside around the church and the campus, shuttling people back and forth, actors and all this. Just so many things going on, and so I'm going to. And I knew he was in the choir. He had a good voice. He was in the university choir, and they practiced during the week in our sanctuary. So I walk in there and I look at my watch and I thought he's going to be done here in about 5 minutes. I'll wait and talk to him. I knew I could grab him because I had some things we had to go over with on a checklist. And so I I was back there and it came to the end of the hour. And so I'm ready to get to this kid because just as soon as he broke from the choir group, I was going to get him. And and just then the choir director said, "Well, I know we're running late." He looked at his watch. "I know we're running late," but he said, "I've got one more number that I need you to go over." And so I'm impatient, and I'm hem hawing. I'm back underneath the balcony. And I'm the only one in there, only person in there. And the piano.
You're probably pacing like a caged tiger.
I am, and the piano hit the chord, and they came out with the words from Isaiah, the 43rd chapter, "Fear not."
Mm.
And I thought, what's this? "Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I love you. You are mine. When you walk through the waters, they'll not overflow you. And the fire, you walk through the fire, it'll not burn you." And I'm not the smartest guy around, but I knew in that moment, and I was such a wreck. I'd been some hospice training early in the week, and I was just, my nerves were on right now. And in that moment, I knew that God wanted to tell me something, and it was through that experience that I began to start. That didn't fix me. There was
Mhm.
so much more. Took me years, but that was one of the turning points for me. And I wrote about it in the book, and I said it was a time when I knew that God wanted to say something to me, that I was not alone, that He was with me.
Mhm.
And I treasure that moment, that memory, because it was when you're out there by yourself and you feel like you've got no one to talk to, nowhere to turn, and you're like in a desert. And that moment was like a spiritual oasis for me, where I found something that I could hold on to and go
Mhm.
on to for a while. And so
Mhm.
but there's been a whole lot of things through the years, through the stories and things that have happened, a lot of them around the book that have happened, that experiences that people have told me in their lives as well.
Mhm.
And I, there's one that it begs to be told. I'll tell you this one that just blows me away. We were at a Compassionate Friends conference in Dallas, Texas, a few years ago, and we were checking in at the Hyatt, and my phone buzzed, and I looked at it, and somebody had read the book, and I could see from the subject line that they reached out to me. So I get up to the room on the Wi-Fi, and I wrote back to her, and I said, here, thank you for writing. And her story was that she had lost a son about a year before. He was in his early 20s, had an aneurysm. He died right in front of her, and then
Mm.
she had a serious heart attack just a few days later. And
Mm.
so she was languishing around the house, as I recall. She wasn't able to get out hardly, and was just kind of
Mm.
paralyzed there with her grief, and just people told her not to do anything. She didn't know what to do, but she had ordered the book on Amazon and had the course information in the back, and she had reached out and contacted me. And so I wrote her, and then before long, she writes me back a second email. and thanked me. And she said, "Can I talk to you on the telephone?" And I said, "Well, let's see here. I was supposed to do a workshop the next day, but okay, we'll see what we can do." I worked it out with Beulah. The next morning, I was going to try to call her. And so we go into the ballroom. There's about, I think, about 1,500 people of us. We're going to hear Rick Warren's wife, Kay Warren, was to
Mm.
be the key speaker that morning, I remember. And so I took Beulah, yeah, my wife, I said, "Hold me a chair. I'm going to the hallway. I'm going to talk to this lady and I'll be back." And save me a seat. And so she stayed there. I went in the hallway, called this lady, and it was a tough call. She just cried a lot, and I've tried to reassure her where she could get a support. She didn't know where to go for a support group. All that, it was just tough. And so hung up from the phone call, went in and sat with my wife, listened to Kay Warren. We got up, we're getting ready to leave. Now keep in mind, 1,500 people, a lot of folks. We're getting ready to leave, walked down the aisle, and Beulah got to my coat. And she said, "I want you to meet this couple." And just happened to sit down next to me, and met them, and Pat, and I think Bill and Pat and Sue maybe, and so I'm walking away, and I kind of show on my shoulders, "Your first time here?" "Yeah." "So where are you from?" "We're from New York." "Oh yeah." I said, "I just got off the phone talking to a lady from New York." and and they said, "Oh yeah, what part? New York City?" And I said, "No." And I named the town. And they said, "Well, guess what? That's where we're from."
Wow. Mm.
And I said, "Really?" And they said, "What street you live on?" And I looked at my phone again. I looked and I had the street. She had put her address in there. And I said, "Here's the street." And they said, "Well, we're just around the corner neighbors to this lady."
Wow.
I said, "Okay."
Mm.
and so I stood there and I said, "You're not going to believe this." And I told them the story. And so, "Well, we'd be glad to take her to a support group. We can help her." And so got the number, and I
What a
went.
loving God. What a loving, caring God
I
to
got back up to my
something
room
like
and I told this lady, and I said, "You're not going to believe this." And so I said, "Here it is." And so I told her. And so we got back from Dallas 2 days later, and I was thinking about Tuesday. She wrote me another email, and she said, "Guess what? They called me. They came by and got us tonight, took us to a support group, a compassionate friend support group." She said, "They really are nice people." And and in the email, she said, "We couldn't have made this up."
Mm-mm,
And
mm-mm.
then
No.
the last line, she said, "And now I know that God has not forgotten me."
Mm.
And I'll never forget that. And I've had stories like that along the way. Yeah, it blows my mind.
We
And
have to
and
hang on to those
yeah,
because we'll get sucked back down into the darkness again.
yeah,
And we'll have to, did that really happen? Was that
yeah,
really God? Was that? And we have to hold on to those
yeah,
because those are the little
yeah,
kisses and the little hugs and the things that God gifts us with along the way. So yeah, when those things happen, grab hold of them and hang on, write them down so you remember them.
yeah,
And when you begin to, really struggle with, can I really trust God? Is He really there for me? Is He?
yeah,
Go back and read those things and remind yourself of
exactly.
those little things that were really big things
Yeah.
that God just did to love on you. Well, Dennis, I know that we both believe that grief is a teacher in our lives.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it teaches us, it just increases our capacity for compassion. I mean, it does all kinds of things. And I know we all feel like, well, I really, I did it really take the death of my child to get me to this place? I mean, I would
Yeah.
rather have Becca back. And yet, that's not possible. And so I have to learn, and you have to learn, and we all have to learn how to live and how to allow grief to be our teacher, and
Yeah.
even how to allow our children, their lives, to
Mhm.
continue
Yeah.
to be our teacher within our grief and missing them.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It does change you. You really are. You you see life differently, and you are uh, you're a different person. You just quite a bit different. My wife and I, we value friendships a lot differently. As I said, I'm a lot more patient with things. The little things that used to bug me, no, they don't bother me anymore like they used to. I'm not perfect, but it sure has had an effect on me. And I do think uh, when I when I sit with people in a pastoral counseling situation, um, it's almost instinct. I don't always tell people sometimes I will tell them about my son's death, but people just instinctively feel that. I think the
Mm,
empathy that you feel toward them. Uh, I do a lot of funerals and spend a lot of time with people in grief, and that they somehow know that you've been touched by that. You, I guess it's an invisible thing, and yet they realize it. They see it. They know, and
mhm,
so it's a very important part of our ministry. You know, Jesus, of course, told us to bear one another's burdens and pray for one another. And I emphasize that on all my ministry. You know, I said, you can't even get past the first word of the Lord's Prayer. It's not my Father who art in heaven, it's ours. We're in this thing together. And
mhm.
so over 50 times in the New Testament is this one another phrase. Most of us love one another, but pray for one another and bear one another's burdens. And James says, you know, confess your sins one to the other. We're this is not a solitary thing. We are to be in this together. So I've you know, a lot of things I've learned along the way, and and of course, as I said, we're living in a great teacher right now. The pandemic has certainly
Mhm.
taught us
Yeah.
how much we need each other, and and there's a lot of grief going on. You know, we could talk all night about that. There's just an accumulated sadness that's going on, and I'm finding that parents like you and myself, people who have lost children, you know, as uncomfortable as this pandemic is, it's small potatoes compared
It's
to the hell that we've lived through. You talk about,
mhm,
oh
yeah,
yeah, this is nothing really, and
yeah,
so you know, I tell people, hang on, this is, you know, we'll get through this stuff. This is, you know, I hope they never have to go through what parents who have lost children have gone through.
right, yes,
That's
yes.
that's a whole nother ballgame there.
Mhm,
But yeah, I've learned so much. I uh, I just have I think a concerned heart for people that I didn't before, and I'm you don't have time to hear the things that have changed in me, but I think that's it. You know, I have a concerned heart for people that I never I did before. I thought I did, but it's a
mhm.
different thing now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like now we're not the ones giving the platitudes and the scriptures and all the
No,
right
no, no,
Christianese.
no.
And I think that's what people can tell the difference is we're not trying to fix them. We're
Mm.
there to walk with them.
No,
And
no,
there's a
no.
big difference. There's a
Yeah,
big difference.
yeah.
And another thing that can happen, and if we allow it will happen, this whole thing with struggling to trust God and coming out on the other side of it with an intimacy with him that I don't know of any other way to get this kind of intimacy because he experienced the death of his son.
Right.
He did it willingly. I mean, he sacrificed. I would have never gone through this on purpose,
No.
thrown Becca to the wolves to be sacrificed for some renegade. I mean, and I to think that God did that so that we can have intimacy with him and so that we can continue our relationship with our children when we're done here. And I as you were talking, I thought, it's part of it, I think, is because we've been through such a rough time with God, and somehow we've stuck it out with Him. And you
Mm,
think about couples that go through something really horrible, adultery, or the marriage is almost falling apart, and they decide to fight for the marriage. And when they come through the other side,
mhm.
that relationship is so much sweeter and so much
Oh, yeah,
deeper
yeah.
that you can't even describe the other side of it. And I think that's what it's like with God, because we finally get to the point where it's like, you know what, I still don't understand this,
Mhm.
but I'm going to fight for my relationship with God. I know,
Yeah,
like you said, standing at the back door of the church, somehow we know God's the only hope to get through this.
yeah.
But he's the one that, it's that conflict within us on that. But if we decide, I'm going to fight for this relationship with God, when we finally get to that point where that we're not fighting for it anymore, it's there, it's just so much deeper and sweeter, isn't it?
It's a wonderful thing to rest in the assurance that
Yes.
God is patient with us, who sees us. He, the Bible says, He knows that our frames were made of dust. We're not perfect. We're not going to do this perfectly, but to have that assurance that He is with us. One of the things my wife and I, before we go to bed every night, even when we're in bed, one of the last things we do is recite together the 23rd Psalm,
Mm,
and in that that part, even though we walk through the valley of shadow of death, he is with us. That with us part is
mhm.
getting back to what I said a while ago. That I can't emphasize that enough. We just need each other so much, and to have the see God show up in so many different ways. I tell people, we get this, don't we? I mean, the worst form of punishment is solitary confinement. We
Mm,
want to we want to hurt somebody,
yes.
put them in the hole.
Mhm.
And again, this is something that people are catching on to now during these days
Yeah.
of quarantine and being kept from getting out with people very much, and having to
Yeah.
exercise social distance. And it emphasizes what we're talking about here. And so the closeness with God and the closeness with each other, that is, and that's the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to love God with all the heart, soul, mind, and strength, our neighbors, ourselves, and we're bound inextricably into this the relationship together, and we we can we can hurt each other. Somebody said, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. But that's not
Who
true.
made
You
that up?
can't. Yeah, yeah. No, that doesn't work. And so we can be a great encouragement and boost to one another as we listen, as we have that time to care for each other, and we'll find that as we minister to others, it comes back to us. When I spend time with people these days and listen to them and let them unburden their hearts, it comes back to me. I'm glad I'm able to do that. But Henry Nouwen used to call people like us wounded healers, and I guess
Mm,
that's true.
mhm.
That we've been wounded pretty deeply, but we're allowing the wounds to help us in our service to and help to other people. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you have a couple people who put a message here for you, Dennis. You've got Jennifer Walker, and she
Mm,
says, "Good to hear you, Dennis. You helped me so much with my loss." And Sue Hardage says, "Thank you for being real about Eve, you and Beulah have lived through in this deep loss."
mm, thank
So
you, dear
wanted to make sure
people.
you
Yeah,
knew those were there.
yeah.
And Dennis, how can people connect with you? What's the best way?
Yeah, well, my email has changed a little bit. There's a couple of them. I'll just give them both to you if you want to go. I'm at the Church of the Resurrection. If you want to use my church email, it's dennis.apple at core.org. That's cor.org. Dennis.apple at core.org. Or here's another email you can use with me is dapple, KS, like the abbreviation for Kansas,
Mm-hmm.
theappleks@gmail.com.
All
That'll
right.
catch it. Yeah.
And then you have a website, right? The
Yeah, I
writingapple.com.
do. Yeah. Yeah.
All
I
right.
haven't posted anything lately. I've been so busy. I haven't had a chance to do it. I'm
Mhm.
working full time, but I need to get back at it.
You got
So
a lot of stuff on there they can check out, blogs
yeah.
that you've
Hmm.
written and things, and they can,
Yeah.
yeah. So we'll have that information down in the description down below under the video here. And let's see, Connie just hopped on here. And she says, "Crazy question. I received Jesus as my savior years ago, but after losing my daughter, I know her daughter's Whitney, I rarely pray or even think about God. Does that
Yeah.
mean if I die, I won't make heaven?"
Yeah.
And Connie, I know you had to hop on late, and Dennis actually talked about that.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna encourage you to go back once this replays. It takes a while for it to actually get on to replay. It's got to format
Mhm.
itself. Connie, go back and listen to this from the beginning because
Oh yeah.
Dennis did talk about that. So, and I'll just tell you right now, that's not what that means. It's on his end. He's already given you that gift. He has already given you the gift of salvation.
Yeah.
And I like to look at it as God knew that we couldn't keep our end. He knew there was no way we could keep our end of a covenant with him. And so we have God on this end, and he put Jesus on the other end of the covenant, and we're sandwiched in the middle. It's like we're in a covenant sandwich that we can't get out of. He knew we couldn't keep our end of it. And that doesn't mean that we can go out and do whatever we want. It means it's just so
Yeah,
incredible that it makes us want to be in relationship with him and
yeah.
to fight for it. So that's the kind of the quick answer, Connie, is no. It doesn't mean you're not going to make it into heaven because you're struggling with grief. That's not it. So I'm so glad you asked that, Connie.
Good. Appreciate that honesty. Yeah, that's good.
Dennis, would you please pray for us before we
Oh,
turn?
I'd be glad to. Gracious God, how we thank you as we remember the words of Jesus when he said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted."
Mhm.
And we have experienced that comfort here across the years, I know in my own journey, and I pray that comfort for those who may be listening to us just now. I pray, oh God, that you will surround their hearts with your arms of love, that you'll bring into their life the people, the books, the things that they need that will help them along this journey. For we thank you that you indeed promised when you said you'd never leave us, you'd never forsake us.
Mhm.
And while there have been times when we felt all alone and isolated, yet we, underneath it all, we knew that you were there. And so we thank you for that. Thank you for your constancy, that you will be there at every turn, no matter what happens. So help us to hold on to that and to trust you even in the darkest hour, knowing that you are the one who can see us through. Now watch over us, each one. Help us, Father, to continue to walk together, loving you, loving each other as you told us to do. And these things now we'll pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Dennis. And thank you, everyone, for watching this, whether it was live or on the replay down the road. And, feel free to email Dennis. You can email me
Yeah.
at laura@gpshope.org and check out gpshope.org. We've got a lot of support, a lot of resources for you as a bereaved parent. And so, with that, we'll say goodbye for now.
Bye. Thank you.